Hi guys, welcome to Gaming Recall. So this is going to be the first episode in a series of episodes where I'm basically going to reminisce on old school video games. I'll talk about them in as much detail as possible and also cover things like impact and influence and production, etc. Some I'll talk about will be classics, and others I'll talk about you might not have even heard of, so that will serve as a nice little recommendation. But I'll basically start off from the early 90s and work my way up to the present. So let's kick things off with the first game. It is an absolute classic. It is the incredible Streets of Rage 2. Streets of Rage 2 was released in 1992 on the Sega Mega Drive and the Sega Genesis. It is a side-scrolling single-player and multiplayer beat-em-up, and it was developed and published by Sega. It was released in Japan under the titles Bare Knuckle 2, The Requiem of the Deadly Battle, and it's a sequel to Streets of Rage, and it had a follow-up with Streets of Rage 3. Not only developed by Sega, but also developed by H.I.C, Shout, Designworks, MNM Software, and H.I.C. And the soundtrack for Streets of Rage 2 was composed by Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima. It is a mixture of electronic dance music, house, techno, synth and electro-funk. The soundtrack for me has always been a standout feature. In fact, Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack was so well received that Yuzo Koshiro was invited to nightclubs so he could actually play the tracks. Out of the trilogy, this one has had the most success and is widely regarded as the best in the series. It had universal acclaim for the most part, scoring at least 90%, or a 8 or 9 out of 10 from most major review sources. Sega Force reviewers gave it scores of 95%, 93% and 92%. In fact, it is known to be one of the best side-scrolling beat-em-up games ever created, one of the best sequels ever, and even more purely, one of the greatest games ever created, period. Personally, I think it would certainly make it into my top 10. It won several awards from various publications, including Greatest Retro Game Award from Retro Gamer magazine, and my personal favourite award it won would be Hottest Video Game Babe Award for the character of Blaze from Electronic Gaming Monthly. It was ported over to the Game Gear and the Master System, and even came to the iPhone and iPod Touch in 2011, and eventually ported over to all major consoles and PC. Similar games and others it would have influenced would include The Punisher, Final Fight 2, Violent Storm, Double Dragon and the Warriors game. You were able to choose again to play as Axel, an expert martial artist, or Blaze, a judo expert, featured from the previous games, and also two new characters in this one, Max, a wrestler, and Skate, a skater. They all had varied stats and all with individual movesets. Axel's special moves includes one where he swings his arms around and creates a flame in the shape of a dragon, and the other is a rapid fire of punches that ends in an uppercut. Blaze performs a backflip and can chuck a fireball at short range. Skate spins on his head and hits anything that comes close to him and can jump in a diagonal direction towards an enemy. Max can spin around with his fists and can do a huge charge forward, knocking down anyone in his path. I would say Skate pretty much became one of the most popular characters to play. His moves were swift and he was the fastest to play out of all the characters. Max was the polar opposite. He was slow moving but was hard hitting. It was always a lot of fun using his backbreaker move on thugs. So enemy characters included Garcia, Donovan, Y-Signal, Electra, Biker Fog, Big Ben, Raven, Hakuyo, Kusanagi and Jack. And then you had the bosses, which were Barban, Jet, Zamza, Abadid, Abe, Particle and Molecule, Shiva and Mr. X. The game's main goal is to clear area after area of thugs, and then you would encounter a boss at the end of each level. You gain a score at the end, which is part of what made it fun when played cooperatively, as it brought about some very serious competitiveness. You received extra points by picking up money bags and gold bars. Each player has 3 lives, and you replenish your health by either eating turkeys or apples that were scattered around each level. You move around using the D-pad, jump was the C button, and the B button was your basic attack, which when repeated you would produce a flourish of attacks, and A was your special move. Pressing jump and attack whilst moving would perform an air attack. Both the jump button and back button together hits enemies behind you. You have the grab, which was performed by getting close to an enemy, and you'd press the B button and use the D-pad to throw them, or just simply pressing B would grant you like a sort of close-up move. And weapons included knives, lead pipes, katanas, kunai and bombs. I think personally the only thing I wish they kept from the first game was that special ability where you had the cop car pull up and dealt damage to all the enemies on screen. I wish they had maybe just expanded on that, but instead all the characters are given their own individual special moves. I like how in Streets of Rage 2 all the enemies are given names and they have more abilities and there are a lot more different types. So as a kid, God knows how many hours I put into this game, not only single player but with my mates as well. This is one of the earliest games I can think of that brought me the most joy at the time, for sure. I think one particular thing that made this game so damn addictive was the sound effects and the soundtrack. And each level you came across, the soundtrack was very catchy and very distinctive. Can you imagine being in a club listening to the Streets of Rage soundtrack while tripping on something? Bloody hell, that would be quite the experience. All the fight moves and the character designs are very slick and stylish, and no two characters ever felt the same to play. Talking about design, that's one element of the game I particularly loved, was the artistic style and the graphics themselves being pretty ahead of its time and revolutionary. So much detail in both foreground and the background. Each level you enter was just a treat for the eyes. Also, look at that cover art. I mean, I've always had a massive appreciation for it. They literally don't design them like this anymore. So I believe for me this would have been one of, if not the first multiplayer experience I ever had. So let's get into a little bit of the story. After the defeat of Mr. X at the end of the first game, he is returned for revenge against our main protagonists. He has taken Adam hostage, who is a character in the first game, and is the older brother to Skate, who is, of course, one of the new characters in this game. And original characters Axel, Blaze, and second new character Max team up for the rescue mission. So let's briefly go through the levels, which there are 8 of them altogether. This is another great element that contributed to making it such a great game, was the variation of the level designs and the enemy characters. One minute you're on the street, next minute you're in a bar, then a highway, then a rooftop, a stadium, then you're on a boat, beach, factories, and fighting on elevators. You start off on the streets with some amazing neon lighting in the background with the game's generic thug Garcia. Further on you're up against the famous guys in yellow in the bar, the Y signals. They used to drive me absolutely mad when they used to do that bloody slide move. Crafty buggers they were. And then end level boss Barben, who is fairly easy to defeat. After that is a cool little section with the bikers, which was a nice little breakup of the gameplay. There was that one called Tempest, who would kindly jump off and drop a pole for you to smack him with. But as it progressed, it got a little bit more tricky as they started throwing bombs. So at the end of this level, you have probably one of the easiest bosses, Jet, who is very easily exploited, as you could just fly kick him every time he tries to fly at you. At the beginning of level 3 you have the backdrop of the fun fair, and I love the arcade machines in the next part, which then leads on to a pirate ship. Then new addition of the ninjas, which were actually quite tricky to fight. Leading up to the end level boss, you're then in this cave of sorts and you fight Zamza, who is fairly annoying as he would flip around everywhere and block many of your attacks, but wasn't too difficult. You're then back onto the streets and then you're onto a football stadium, and then you have to fight, for me, was always one of the toughest Streets of Rage bosses, Wrestler Abedid. He used to terrify me. I always found the background crowd hilarious to look at. Next up, we're on a boat and faced with the sailor slash boxer Abe, who would throw some seriously dangerous punches your way if you weren't careful, and he is one in particular I used to have a lot of problems with. I used to just run away from him as much as I could and just throw him the odd punch now and again. Like I said, the scenery is very diverse, because next you're on a beach and then a sort of woodland path where you're up against a lot of Y signals and B signals, who will tear you a new one if you get too close to them, and because they kept using that damn slide as well. End level bosses are Stealth and Sulfur. So the factory section leads to another elevator which takes us to the next bosses, Particle and Molecule. So at this point you're quite close to the end, with just one last elevator taking you up to sub-boss Shiva and final boss Mr. X with his delightful Tommy gun. Defeat him, save Adam, credits roll. So as I said, Streets of Rage 2 followed up with a third game in the series. I remember getting it at the time, and a lot of my friends were shocked to find out that there was actually a third game available. In fact, even decades later, I've told other friends that there is a third game in the franchise, and discovered that there's still people years later after its release that were actually unaware of its release. Good news is that production had started on a fourth game in 2018. Which will be set 10 years after Streets of Rage 3, which I'd only just discovered myself recently. And as a bonus, it's going to get released on all major platforms as well. Yay! the release date still to be announced. Rumours are that there will be returning characters like Blaze and Axel, and a new character called Cherry Hunter, so yeah, can't wait for that. If you click the link in the description box, that will take you to some gameplay footage courtesy of IGN. So just to wrap things up, just wanted to add that for me personally, this game was an absolute landmark in regards to how much of an impact it had on me and the importance that impact was in regards to how this game would have been the first one that gave me an appreciation for graphical style, gameplay mechanics, sound, and a genuine love for the characters. So it's fair to say that Streets of Rage 2 was responsible for putting me on the path to becoming a serious gamer. This is also the earliest game I can think of where I had truly felt that addiction to the gameplay, and more importantly for introducing me to the value of escapism, and even more importantly, pure joy. So guys, hope you enjoyed my gaming recall video on Streets of Rage 2. Look out for more of these coming soon, but for now, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified of future content. You've been listening to Feature Creature, and I'll catch you soon.